Story 1. The small town of Willow Creek had always been a quiet and peaceful place. But one summer, something changed. People started disappearing without a trace. At first, everyone assumed they had simply left town, but as the numbers grew, a sense of unease settled over the community. The townspeople began to suspect foul play, and a group of volunteers set out to search the nearby woods. They found nothing at first, but eventually, they stumbled upon a clearing deep in the forest. It was a grisly sight. Bodies, torn and mangled, lay scattered around the clearing. In the center of the carnage stood a strange figure, its back turned to the search party. One of the volunteers called out to the figure, but it did not respond. As they approached, they saw that it was not human, but something much worse. Its skin was gray and mottled, and its limbs were twisted and gnarled. Suddenly, the creature turned to face them, and they saw its eyes, empty and black, with no hint of humanity. The volunteers ran, but the creature was fast. It chased them through the woods, its unearthly screams echoing behind them. Only a few of the search party made it back to town alive. The survivors were traumatized, unable to speak of what they had seen. But as more and more people disappeared, they knew they had to act. They banded together, forming a plan to hunt down the creature and put an end to its reign of terror. Armed with weapons and courage, they set out into the woods, determined to stop the monster once and for all. But the creature was cunning, and it knew the terrain better than they did. It picked them off one by one, dragging their broken bodies back to its lair. As the days passed, the town grew quiet. The streets were empty, and fear hung heavy in the air. Those who remained huddled together in their homes, praying that the monster would not find them. But it did. The creature burst through doors and windows, dragging screaming victims back to the woods. The townspeople fought back with all their might, but it was no use. The creature was too powerful, too relentless. In the end, there were only a handful of survivors. They fled the town, never looking back. And in the years that followed, no one dared to enter Willow Creek again. But some say that the creature still roams the woods, searching for its next victim. And they say that sometimes, it's better to leave survivors behind, for they will only bring the monster back to the town once more. Story 2. The Backrooms were a maze-like series of endless rooms, abandoned and forgotten by society. A place where people would go missing, never to be seen again. In Part 3, we follow the story of a group of friends who ventured into the backrooms in search of answers, but they found something far more terrifying. The group had been wandering through the yellow, musty corridors for hours, growing more and more disoriented. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Just when they thought they had found a way out, they stumbled upon a room unlike any they had seen before. The walls were pulsing and fleshy, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. They tried to leave, but the door had disappeared. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. That's when they heard it, a faint whispering, growing louder and more frantic. They couldn't make out the words, but they knew something was coming for them. They huddled together in the corner, trembling with fear as the whispers grew louder and more insistent. Suddenly, a figure materialized out of the darkness, a woman, her hair matted and wild, her eyes sunken and hollow. She whispered something to them, but they couldn't understand. Then she lunged forward, her mouth open in a silent scream. They ran, their hearts pounding as they fled down the endless corridors. But the woman was fast, and she pursued them relentlessly. As they turned a corner, they saw a glimmer of hope, a door, partially ajar. They pushed their way through, stumbling into a room that seemed almost normal. But it was a trap. The room was full of mannequins, their painted-on eyes following their every move. The group tried to leave, but the door was stuck. One by one, the mannequins came to life, their blank faces contorting into twisted grins. They surrounded the group, their hands reaching out to grab them. In the end, only one of the friends made it out alive. He stumbled back into the real world, his mind forever scarred by the horrors of the backrooms. But as he tried to tell his story, he found that no one would believe him. They thought he was crazy, or on drugs, or just making it up. He knew the truth, though. He had been to the backrooms, and he had seen the horrors that lurked within. And he knew that, somewhere, the woman and the mannequins were waiting for their next victims. Story 3. The story begins with a group of friends exploring an abandoned industrial complex that was rumored to have once housed a secret government research facility. As they make their way through the dusty corridors and rusted metal walkways, they begin to notice strange symbols etched into the walls and floors. The group eventually reaches a staircase that leads up to the upper levels of the complex. As they climb, they notice that the air is growing hotter and more humid with each step. When they finally reach the top, they find themselves in a vast, open chamber filled with flickering torches and molten lava. As they explore the upper levels, they begin to hear strange noises echoing through the cavernous space. It sounds like something is moving in the shadows, watching them. They try to brush it off as their imagination's running wild, but the feeling of unease only grows stronger. Suddenly, they hear a blood-curdling scream. One of their group members has disappeared, and the rest of the group realizes they are not alone. Something is hunting them. They run for their lives, but the corridors twist and turn in impossible ways, leading them in circles. The creature pursuing them is getting closer, and they can feel its hot breath on their necks. They finally stumble upon a room filled with strange equipment and devices. It's not clear what they do, but the group quickly realizes that they need to use them to defend themselves. As they work frantically to activate the machines, the creature bursts into the room. It's a massive, flaming demon, its eyes glowing with malice. The group fights for their lives, but the demon seems invincible. Just when all hope seems lost, one of the group members has an idea. They realize that the symbols they saw earlier might hold the key to defeating the demon. They begin to chant the symbols, and the demon begins to weaken. In a final, epic battle, the group manages to defeat the demon and escape the upper levels. But they know that they will never forget the horrors they witnessed, and that the industrial complex still holds many secrets, waiting to be discovered. As they leave, they notice that the symbol they chanted has been etched into their skin. It's a constant reminder of the terror they faced, and the price they paid for their curiosity. Story 4. It was a typical day at St. Mary's Asylum, a psychiatric hospital that had been in operation for over a century. Dr. Jonathan Roberts had been working there for years, treating patients with various mental illnesses. But today was different. Dr. Roberts was assigned to a new patient, patient 367. Patient 367 was brought in by the police after being found wandering aimlessly on the streets. She was a young woman in her early 20s, with long black hair and piercing green eyes. Dr. Roberts found her to be quite unusual, and her case intrigued him. He began to interview her, hoping to uncover the root of her mental illness. But as he delved deeper into her past, he began to realize that something was not quite right about her. Patient 367 claimed that she could see things that others couldn't. She spoke of a dark presence that followed her everywhere she went, a presence that whispered in her ear and tormented her day and night. Dr. Roberts dismissed her claims as hallucinations, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to her story. As the days passed, patient 367's behavior became more and more erratic. She refused to eat or sleep, claiming that the dark presence was keeping her up at night. Her eyes grew sunken, and her skin became pale and clammy. One night, Dr. Roberts was working late when he heard a blood-curdling scream coming from patient 367's room. He rushed to her side, only to find her lying in a pool of her own blood. She had scratched her arms and face with her own fingernails, leaving deep gashes and bruises all over her body. Dr. Roberts was horrified, and he immediately called for help. The hospital staff rushed to her aid, but it was too late. Patient 367 was dead. Dr. Roberts couldn't shake off the feeling that he had failed her. He became obsessed with her case, determined to uncover the truth behind her illness. He began to research her past, and what he found shook him to his core. Patient 367 had a history of mental illness in her family. Her mother had suffered from severe depression, and her grandmother had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. But what was more disturbing was that patient 367 had a twin sister who had died at birth. Dr. Roberts began to suspect that patient 367 was not alone in her room, that her twin sister's spirit had been haunting her all along. He began to conduct experiments, hoping to make contact with the other side. But what he didn't realize was that he was playing with fire. One night, while conducting a séance, the dark presence that patient 367 had spoken of appeared before him. It was a shadowy figure with glowing eyes, and it spoke to him in a language he couldn't understand. Dr. Roberts tried to flee, but the presence followed him, whispering in his ear and tormenting him just as it had done to patient 367. Dr. Roberts began to lose his mind, just like patient 367 had done before him. He started seeing things that weren't there, and he became increasingly paranoid. He stopped coming to work, and the hospital staff found him in his home, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Patient 367's case remains a mystery to this day. Some believe that she was truly haunted by her twin sister's spirit, while others believe that it was all in her head. But one thing is for sure, the dark presence that tormented her and Dr. Roberts is still out there, lurking in the shadows and waiting for its next victim. As the years went by, rumors began to circulate about strange happenings at the hospital where patient 367 had been kept. Some claimed to have heard her ghostly cries echoing through the halls, while others reported seeing a shadowy figure moving through the rooms. Dr. Roberts, for his part, never fully recovered from his encounter with patient 367. He became obsessed with trying to understand the dark force that had possessed her, spending long hours poring over old medical journals and occult texts. But the more he learned, the more he realized that he was in over his head. One night, as he was leaving the hospital, Dr. Roberts heard a faint whisper in his ear. He turned to look, but no one was there. From that moment on, he was plagued by nightmares and waking visions of patient 367, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Despite his fears, Dr. Roberts knew that he had to confront the dark force that had taken hold of patient 367. He spent months preparing himself, studying ancient rituals and collecting arcane artifacts. Finally, he was ready. With a sense of grim determination, he returned to the hospital where it all began. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the halls were shrouded in darkness. As he made his way to patient 367's old room, Dr. Roberts felt a chill run down his spine. He could sense the dark presence, watching him, waiting for him. With a steady hand, he began to perform the ritual he had prepared. The air crackled with energy, and a foul wind began to blow through the room. Suddenly, he heard a scream, the same scream that had haunted him for years. He turned to see patient 367 standing before him, her eyes glowing with a terrible light. For a moment, Dr. Roberts was paralyzed with fear. But then he remembered why he had come. With a fierce determination, he continued the ritual, chanting the ancient incantations and waving his arms in arcane patterns. As he worked, he could feel the dark presence beginning to weaken. Patient 367 S screams grew fainter, and her eyes began to dim. At last, it was over. The dark force that had tormented patient 367 for so long was gone. Dr. Roberts breathed a sigh of relief, but he knew that he could never forget what he had seen. As he left the hospital, he knew that he would never be the same. The world was a darker, more dangerous place than he had ever imagined, and he had glimpsed a truth that few would ever know. But he also knew that he had triumphed over the darkness, and that he had done what he could to protect those around him from its malevolent power. Those around him from its malevolent power. Those around him from its